evening. It's Monday night, 6 p.m., and it's time for CU Progressive News. I'm Sandra Ahten. It is, you're listening to WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, streaming online at WEFT.org. Brian Dunn's in the house with me. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
And Saxon's at the board. Thank you, Saxon, for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. We got a lot to cover tonight, and we have a wonderful guest tonight, Ondine Gross, who wrote the book, Restore the Respect, How to Mediate School Conflicts and Keep Students Learning. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with Ondine after we get through the announcements in the news. But first, we want to tell you that we are in Fall Pledge Drive. We are very proud to say that we have already raised $5,732.30, and we are kicking it off today with a $5,000 pledge that came in from people who support public affairs programming like this. Do you believe in public affairs programming on WEFT? I hope so. And I hope you've been enjoying all you've been listening to so far tonight. Democracy Now! Every day at 4 o'clock, followed by half-hour programs of news and information, such as the one that the Time of Useful Consciousness that played at 5 o'clock, and then Vicki so wonderfully produces the Disability Beat Radio every Monday at 5:30. So we really appreciate Vicki, and we hope you appreciate us and all that WEFT brings to the community. I was telling some folks beforehand that we are in a different turnaround mode here, just to be really frank with the information, and there's no reason why not to be, because it's a public institution, and you can find the information anywhere online, not online, but by coming to our board meetings or by requesting it. But basically, the bottom line is that we lost about $15,000 to $17,000 the last 2 years in a row. We did not operate in the black. We operated in the red, and we need to operate in the black this year because we have about $30,000 in the bank right now. So we need to up that by $20,000 by this pledge drive. So that's our goal, $20,000 for this pledge drive. We're doing really great with increasing our underwriting. That's the sustaining from businesses in the community. We're working on grants. We have some great fundraisers planned, and we think we can make this happen, but we need your help to do it. And so we're calling on you right now to give us a call at 359-9338. So, Brian, you got a couple of public service announcements for us?
Yeah, so this Friday at the University YMCA at 1001 South Wright Street from 12 to 1 p.m., there's going to be a lunchtime speaking event. So the Friday Forum, it's a weekly thing the University YMCA does, and this Friday they will be analyzing the issues of the 2016 elections coming up this fall. The speaker on September 9th is John K. Wilson, talking about the myth of political correctness, free speech, Donald Trump, and the conservative attack on higher education. For more than 2 decades, conservatives have accused the left of launching a war of political correctness, censoring opposing views, and indoctrinating students on college campuses. Now, Donald Trump has become the presidential nominee, proclaiming himself politically incorrect. What does the political correctness mean, and how would Donald Trump reshape free speech and higher education?
This is a scary topic, but somebody's got to talk about it. It's going to be talked about at the Friday Forum. Yep. So you want to pull up the next one for Speak Cafe? Well, I tell you that all of our public service announcements can now be found online at wef.org/PSA, and then you'll find a little calendar there where you can find any information. So we're just going to give you a rundown of some brief notes about it, and you can go there and look for more.
Yeah, so Speak Cafe is something at the Cranard Art Museum this Thursday, September 8th from 7 to 9 p.m. Speak stands for Song, Poetry, Expressions, Art, and Knowledge. It started about 10 years ago during the Race, Roots, and Resistance movement as a nod to the Black Power movement. And they don't hinder creative expressions, so love poems are welcome. But at this event, they want to have a powerful social and political messages and talks about those issues. So invite your friends and come enjoy a night of art at the Cranard Art Museum. You can find more information about that at kam.illinois.edu.
Yeah, and I like to encourage my white friends who think, well, you know, where do I go to hang around with black people? That's where you could go. Yeah. Because it is primarily an African-American centered thing, but it's open to the public, and it would be a great idea to be able to raise your cultural awareness by going over there.
Definitely a good idea. Check that out.
All right. I'm going to present now an editorial written by Doug Olive, who is an air shifter here. And I saw that he submitted this online to the News Gazette, so maybe they'll choose to publish it, maybe they won't, but this is very much in the spirit of Labor Day. This is Doug's voice. As I recently boarded the city bus at the county fair shelter, a young woman also boarded after placing her bicycle on the bus's bike rack. She sat across from me and heaved a weary sigh. I spoke, and she proceeded to tell me that she had just finished working a 12-hour shift in a workplace that I was familiar with. I felt disappointed and aggravation at this news. I remember quite well that the 12-hour day based on agricultural sun-up to sundown day was once the standard for the American working class. The 10-hour day was first achieved in 1829 on the East Coast when the trade unions of New York agitated for it. That same year, the Working Men's Party was born in New York, following the precedent a year early of the organized labor movement of Philadelphia. Words don't easily describe my disapproval of people working 12-hour shifts in 2016, particularly in our community where we should have a choice in the matter. It's an egregious example of the unacceptable distance between theory and practice. While it may look efficient on the business accounting ledgers, it's an abusive treatment of the workers. The disparity is even more acute in the hometown of our state's main university campus, where a new school of business was recently built, doubling the classroom capacity of the U of I Commerce Department. This is where students learn the skills that are supposed to qualify them as decision makers. The entire university, with all its various disciplines, is indeed a business, each department working on a budget. A university, a highly respected community, ought to strive to ensure that the human culture it promotes offers a great promise to greater numbers and doesn't discriminate inhumanely against any of those who supply the labor necessary to make quote-unquote progress. When East Coast workers agitated for the 10-hour day in 1829, they were producers who wanted a decent living wage. Today's workers, the majority of us, are defined not as producers, but as consumers, a subtle distinction invented by New Deal economist with whom Keynes fully agreed. So we ought to ask ourselves, how can we call ourselves a consumer society a success when 20% of our population struggle to survive, and the distinction between pauper and working poor is just as real as it was in 1900, as the latter struggles to be fed, clothed, and housed, and the former has given up. That's by Doug Olive in an editorial that he submitted to the News Gazette, which I doubt that they would print, but we read in full here.
I shared it on Facebook, and I had a lot of friends in the food service industry, some who were working 10 to 12-hour shifts today, and it really resonated with them.
Yeah. You know, it's an amazing phenomena that we're back to this idea of 12-hour shifts, and that anybody thinks it's a good idea is completely beyond the pale. I mean, I've experienced shift work, both from my former spouse was a shift worker, and it just plays havoc with relationships. You know, to have a decent life when you're working a 12-hour shift, you can't do anything except try to get your sleep schedule figured out and barely maintain just a barely maintain life, and you can't focus on becoming a more fully realized person. So then it's hard to have relationships, and so many divorces with people who have shift work and 12-hour days. Crazy. All right. So next, you're going to tell us about the Progressive Fall Training. Yeah.
So the People's Agenda Fall Training and Kickoff is coming up in a couple weeks. So on Saturday, September 24th, from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m., you can join the People's Agenda for an afternoon of training, planning, and doing. On September 24th, it's going to be at the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, the IMC, at 202 South Broadway. Topics are going to include things like how to lobby, how and why we need to fund progressive candidates, and identifying applicants for open boards and commissions, to find progressives to put into positions. And you are welcome to attend whatever part of the event you can, and you can learn more by going onto Carol Amon's website at carolamons.com.
Right. So, just kind of to riff off of that a little bit, that's kind of the Bernie movement is sort of encompassed in that. So hopefully there will be people who were disheartened when Bernie didn't get the nomination. And if you were listening to Democracy Now! Today, it was an interesting debate they had between Robert Rake and he's the former labor secretary, and somebody else who I can't remember his name, but it was really the scorn of, he was really anti-Hillary, but Rake was really like, we have to get behind Hillary. So this is, what I like to think about with the national politics at this time is people are going to have their own way to deal with the craziness that's coming down on the national level. But the best thing that you can do is be involved locally, because that's where you're really going to be able to make a difference, no matter who gets elected at the top, which you're not going to have very much control over. So if you can get involved locally to figure out the pieces that you can influence, and this is what this training is about, how you can make a difference locally. And I like to just remember and bring up, we always at these trainings bring up times when we've had successes here. And we have had successes in the past. We don't have a new jail right now, and it's largely because there's been pushback from the people and saying that's not the way we want to do it. But we do have a lot of problems that can be solved by you getting involved. And just really want to encourage you to come to that meeting. One of the ways that I'm trying to understand how the community Champaign County Mental Health Board works right now, because it seems like they get $6 million every year to try to help direct the community mental health services in this county, and to figure out how that's happening. And it seems to me like we're sinking into a deeper and deeper hole with regard to mental health. And so now we, have a lot going on with that we'll talk about as time goes on. But we're going to ask you again to make the phone light up. 359-9338 is the number here. We are in the middle of Fall Pledge Drive. We're at the beginning of Fall Pledge Drive. We are going to keep asking you until we get up to $20,000. So pledge early, pledge often, pledge as much as you can. One of the things I like to tell you is that I love Pledge Drive, even though some people don't, because it does give us a chance to interact with the community in a way that we don't often get to. So sometimes we feel like we're in here and we wonder, are you listening? And we do find out that indeed people are listening. We had more than, I think 250, something like that, people call in during the last pledge drive and tell us, yes, we're listening, yes, we care. And we want you to be one of those. Let's make it 251 this time and let it be you. I know it takes a lot to get involved with an organization financially the first time, but it gets easier and easier, and it really does make a difference. We operate on a very small budget here. I think it's around $120,000 a year is what we need in order to stay afloat, and we haven't been making that. We've been, as I said, coming up short. But we do a lot of work for $120,000. It's pretty amazing that a full power radio station can stay on the air for $120,000 a year. So certainly we don't blow any of that money, that's for sure. We do have a story about schools, and Brian's going to bring us that story, and then we're going to have Ondine Gross as our guest today. She actually works in the Champaign schools, but she's not here in that capacity today. She's here in the capacity of an author, having written the book called Restore the Respect. And we're also going to talk about how and why mediation can work to help keep students in school instead of suspension and the other ways that are sometimes used to just discipline students. It's a really interesting conversation. Stay tuned for that.
Right. So we have a great story here from Jeffrey Schwab of IllinoisPolicy.org. And he writes that in the land of Lincoln, missing school can come with misdemeanor charges. If you've been given notice that your child has been absent from school without a valid cause and knowingly and willfully permitted your child to continue to miss school, you can be charged with a Class C misdemeanor in Illinois, which can result in either 30 days in jail or a fine of up to $500 or both. Illinois law requires children ages 6 to 17 to attend public school, with some exceptions, including children attending private school or parochial school, or children being homeschooled where certain requirements are met. A child may not be absent from school without a valid cause for 5% or more of the previous 180 regular attendance days, or 9 days. Prior to 2011, Illinois law prohibited a child from being absent from public school for 10% or more of the previous 180 regular attendance days, or 18 days. Valid cause is defined as illness, observance of religious holiday, death in the immediate family, or a family emergency. Because absences are based on the previous 180 regular attendance days and not the current school year, it's possible for a child to be in violation of the law in the first few days of the new school year. So how are the missed days calculated? According to St. Clair County Regional Superintendent Susan Safety, for a student to be counted present for the entire day, they must be there for at least 300 minutes. So if a school day is 305 minutes and they are 5 minutes tardy, they miss half of a day, technically. That means that if your child is 5 minutes late 18 times in a school year, you could go to jail, even though your child would have only missed 90 minutes of school and likely little to no instructional time. But regardless of the threshold for truancy, is criminally charging the parents of a truant child an effective or appropriate way to handle missing school? Imprisoning the parent of a truant child or requiring her to pay a hefty fine often only exacerbates the problem, particularly for lower income and single parent families. The effect of criminally charging the parent of a child who is truant is less stability for the child. Taking a parent out of a child's life for 30 days simply creates more turmoil in the child's life, which could lead to more missed school. And even if the charges are eventually dropped or the parent is acquitted, there are costs associated with being charged in the first place. For example, missing a court date can lead to a warrant for the arrest of the charged parent. For a single working parent, having to take time off work to go to court can be problematic since it could be difficult to schedule or may reduce their earnings.
All right, we'll just leave it at that. That's, just one of the things to think about, and the reason I picked this story up for today is because it just speaks, even if this hasn't happened locally, it just speaks to the criminalization of everyday life, the ability that you have to make somebody a criminal. Imagine then if you're homeless, you got a couple of kids, you're trying to get them into school, you're people, and even at the beginning of the school year, you're like, people are struggling to figure out where am I going to live that can have some stability for the next school year. And this isn't just people who are homeless. There are so many people who are working fast food jobs, who are working in restaurants, whatever. They have income instability, and it does result in not getting your kids to school in time a lot of times, or to having truancy. And even if something needs to be done, seriously criminalizing the parents for this, and it's just one example of the way that like I said, the criminalization of everyday life. And then when you disproportionately target African Americans, which generally happens, then all of a sudden that's why our jails are filled. And whether it's this or it's driving while black or whatever, you can, it's been a long-standing kind of joke of women who get pulled over by cops. Oh, you can cry, you can flirt, you can do whatever to get out of a ticket, And I just grew up with that kind of knowledge of like, oh, I might get pulled over, but more than likely I'm not going to get a ticket, Yep. But the fact of the matter is that's because I'm a white woman, that's why that is. And it's just not the same if you continually criminalizing more and more aspects of our life. It leads to people having fines. Democracy Now! Did a piece last week on a woman who just the amount of fines that stacked up. And so somebody's in jail for something like this, and then all of a sudden they owe 300 more, and then they owe 400 more, and then they've lost their job. And pretty soon she spent 6 months in jail. And, it just really does add up. And we need to and should address this. And I'm really concerned because, like I said, this kind of all ties in that the Salvation Army Men's Emergency Shelter closed down in April. And now the Time Center has recently closed down. It was ran for a long time by what was called Champaign County, the Mental Health Center of Champaign County, which leads you to believe that Champaign County had a mental health center, but in fact they had a private corporation that was somewhat affiliated with Provena Hospital. Provena Hospital ended their affiliation with them, and they changed their name then later to become Community Elements, and then this year Community Elements got bought by Rosecrans. So that's a little bit of a long line, but the bottom line is that it used to be a emergency shelter. And what I'm going to do today is just read something that was written by the person who today runs Rosecrans here locally. Her name is Sheila Ferguson, and she wrote this back in 2010. On Valentine's Day 2000, Time Center moved from the basement of the McKinley Presbyterian Church and Foundation on campus to its current location in downtown Champaign. While it's hard to believe that the new facility is celebrating its 10th anniversary for various Champaign County volunteers, city and social service provider staff, this has been a long-term relationship lasting for more than 35 years. The goal to end homelessness has not been reached yet, and while food and shelter continue to be part of what you receive if you use the men's winter emergency shelter in the past or Time Center today, the homeless, the community, the staff, and those who fund and support the program and services have continued to work together to improve and implement best practice methods that lead to self-sufficiency. Time Center began as emergency shelter in the 1970s when concerned citizens and churches banded together in a grassroots effort to tackle a need unaddressed in our community at that time. In the late 1990s, recognizing the overlap of mental illness within the population and the ability to meet the growing needs of this population in the current facility, Time Center became part of the Mental Health Center of Champaign County, another longtime CU agency operating since 1956. Time Center as a program has changed multiple times over the years, constantly adapting and improving the programs to meet the community's current needs and emerging research on how to best address homelessness at the individual level. Currently, Time Center operates, quote, as a transitional living facility for homeless men. The men in the program work with staff members to help identify and eliminate roadblocks enabling their homelessness, like lack of ID, lack of medication, drug, alcohol abuse, unemployment, with the goal of returning to self-sufficiency. The social ills that can lead to homelessness are issues that appear every day in this newspaper. Economic downturn, untreated drug problems, mental illness are all issues that continue to affect our community. As a symptom of these issues, homelessness can sometimes be easily ignored. People can go throughout their day without thinking or being directly affected by homelessness. But not Champaign-Urbana. Time Center stands as a testament to how much a community can care about its people. Managing a set of programs and services that cannot, by definition, charge for services is reliant on the community support, grants, and volunteers. Operating a commercial soup kitchen that alone has served over 66,000 meals to the entire community last year would not be possible if not for the dedicated and supportive community. Time Center cannot operate without the same network that allowed it to be created in the first place. Concerned citizens and organizations like churches, fraternities, and local businesses. This network has been instrumental in allowing Time Center to function through the years because of their donations and well, she goes on a little bit. As we reflect on our history, we recognize that the work is not done. Homelessness continues. And so just to say that was their position in 2010 and 2016, it's closed. They still do have a transitional program for 20 men there. But the 60 to 80 to 100 beds that are needed to keep people out of the cold in the winter, it's gone. And it's gone to a private organization. And in the beginning, just to say, the city of Champaign gave $300,000. The city of Urbana gave $150,000. There was, I believe, somewhere between $25,000 from Champaign County Mental Health Board, and they launched a fundraising campaign for another $100,000. And the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development gave $130,000. So that's how the first the Time Center got built, and now it's in the hands of a private organization that says we're done with providing emergency men's shelter. So we have work to do, people, and I'm on it. I'm helping figure it out. Hello, Ondine.
Hi, Sandra.
Glad to have you here. Well, I'm thrilled that you got to write this book, and I'm more thrilled just to learn that you've been doing this mediation in the schools for more than how long now?
Well, now I'm going on my 6th year.
Mm-hmm. And so the basic premise of this is that instead of using other kinds of remediation, I guess you would say, or discipline, or possibly in connection with other methods of discipline, you are offering teachers and students, or students and students, or even adults in the building, a chance to have mediation. And I just go ahead and explain mediation in a nutshell.
Well, that's exactly right. actually got trained here in town, and I want to give a shout out to Prairie Land Conflict Resolution and Mediation Center.
Okay.
Because that's where I learned the model for mediation that I adapted for school use. And when I learned this mediation technique, the first thing that struck me was this is really simple. And what would happen if we use this model with teachers and students when there's a conflict or something happens of a disciplinary nature? Maybe the student mouths off at the teacher, leaves the class without permission, says F you, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But then the traditional discipline model would be, okay, suspension, call home, whatever. And then 1 day later, 3 days later, you're back in the classroom, and there's been no way for that teacher and student to kind of process what happened or why it happened or what the backstory is. So that leaves each person sort of with assumptions that might not be true, or maybe simmering in some resentment.
Absolutely.
Because, so this was just a way to say, okay, let's bring you both. It's voluntary. It's always voluntary. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in conjunction with whatever discipline thing might happen, because it's not necessarily to replace discipline, but it's just a common sense idea of let's bring this teacher and student into a voluntary meeting using the structure of mediation, which means that the mediator is impartial. Mm-hmm. The mediator engages in self-determination, which means the mediator does not guide the two people. They can talk about whatever they choose to talk about.
Really? You don't guide them?
Not really, unless they sort of seek that guidance. The model is really simple. I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
Each party is welcomed with a lot of enthusiasm, because I am enthusiastic when people are willing to come, and they're told that, welcome, there's just a few rules for what we're going to do here today. I'm going to ask each of you to speak only to me and tell me what brought us here today. While one person is talking, the other person can sit back, relax, and listen. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee that person will learn things they might not have learned before. Then the other person will get a turn and tell me what brought us here. The only rules are no interrupting, no put-downs. As I said, I'm impartial as a mediator. The meeting is confidential. The participants are there in a voluntary way, and what they choose to talk about is up to them. Mm-hmm. And that's the concept of self-determination. And sure enough, when one person is talking to me, I'm using reflective listening skills, but I'm also kind of moving away from the conflict itself, or maybe the misunderstanding, because there's always going to be a backstory. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be a time when that teacher and student came together with good intentions mm-hmm. and positivity before things got derailed. So I'm also going to mine for that. I call it mining for gold in the book. I want to say, tell me something positive that happened before this incident. Mm-hmm. Or maybe those two people just needed a way to develop rapport and trust. So tell me what you do when you're not in school. So in other words, I'm there sort of facilitating just the humanization of each party to one another.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you're directing the conversation.
Well, that's what I write about in the book, because that is kind of where the skill comes in. Mm-hmm. Because it's not just about the conflict, it's about helping reboot this relationship of these two people.
Well, something came to mind when you were talking, a couple of things I want to touch on. But one, the fact that they're expected to just go back in the classroom without any kind of reconciliation is kind of crazy. That would be like me as a boss having, my employee, let's say, call in sick one day, and I'm all ticked off about it and had to do her job and blah, blah, blah. And then we never have any, I really was sick, this is what happened to me, blah, blah, blah. But if I hear, then I get over my little resentment. Mm-hmm. Everybody has times when they're sick, or whatever. But I always try to have anytime I get, upset as a boss, I always try to make sure that I have a place to let's talk about this, so that they feel heard and I feel heard at least. And that's what you're trying to do in there.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. And that's why it was so hard as an adult with that sort of skill or social skill or understanding of how important that little conversation is, to bear witness to the fact that these little conversations are not happening. Yeah. And that's just weird. Mm-hmm. And that's not teaching anybody social skills, problem-solving skills, or communication skills. Right. Which is really sort of also the hidden agenda of these mediations, is let's model how people do this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing reminds me also, like you talked about the backstory, and I just thinking about my marriage. The thing you're fighting about is not really the thing you're fighting about, right? You're fighting because you're not heard, mm-hmm. because you feel disrespected in some way or whatever. But it's usually not about the dishes or who's picking up the whatever. So, and along those lines, I tell everyone, it's not like mediation is the miracle cure. It's not the end all be all, but the fact that two people are even willing to show up and have that conversation, which keep in mind is really a very impressive thing for a student to take on. And also it's impressive for a teacher to kind of leave their comfort zone and leave their sort of authoritative thing and say, you know what, I will level the playing field in this meeting, and I'm willing to admit even maybe that I could have handled things better. And they do that.
Yeah, I'm speaking to Ondine Gross. She's written the book Restore the Respect, How to Mediate School Conflicts and Keeps Students Learning. She's been practicing mediation in the Champaign School. She's a Champaign School psychologist, although she's here as a role of an author today. So I want to talk about the process of writing the book. That must have been fun too. But I wanted to ask you about the voluntary part of it, because maybe it's voluntary, but so many times kids are coerced, especially in this situation where well, if I don't go, what will happen? It reminds me of a plea bargain. Well, that kind of thing. Well, yeah, I'll do it. I'll say I'm guilty and I'll show up for your thing or whatever. So what about that? How voluntary is it?
It's 100% voluntary, because it doesn't work if it's not. And because I helped sort of introduce this, I also got to shape it and really enforce that rule. And I will say that a couple of times I've compromised and thought, well, we should have it anyway. The student's not really into it, but we should just give it a try because it's so important that they hear this from the teacher or blah, blah, blah. It always backfires. I am absolutely adamant that it's 100% voluntary. And I interview the student myself by going to their classroom and saying, hey, you've been asked to do this mediation. Is this okay with you? I get clearance. I answer their questions. And when they say no, I say, no problem. That's okay. It's okay to say no. It really is voluntary.
And can you talk to us about how it's used in the Champaign School District then? So how often is it used, and how does it work with the disciplinary structure that you have there?
What has happened, I think, in schools in general, and not just in Champaign, is that there's been a recognition that the strict disciplinary actions, even the zero tolerance policies of yesteryear, are just a disaster.
Not very long ago.
Well, and they're a disaster. We lose students. African American students with disabilities are the hardest hit, and there has been recognition, hopefully across the country, and there's real trends toward what they call like multi-tiered systems of supports and positive behavioral supports, with the idea that we really have to teach the behaviors that we want to see kids engage in and not just punish them when they don't do what we think they should do. So a lot of those shoulds, well, by now you should know this, and by now he should know that, or she should know this, have kind of gone out the window, and the responsibility has gotten back to us educators, like, what are we teaching? What do we want to see? How are we making sure students learn this stuff? So there's fortunately been a lot of progressive thought about the whole discipline thing anyway. And this whole mediation thing came in on that wave of like restorative practices. It used to be when I started in my career that the social emotional supports that might be given by counselors or social workers or school psychologists were over here, over in the left-hand side of the building. And maybe the disciplinarians, the deans, the administrators were over on the right side of the building. Never the twain shall meet. And you'd sort of be aware, like, well, maybe this child has some psychological issues, or maybe they need some supports. Well, I'm happy to say that now those two spheres of influence have overlapped almost like a Venn diagram.
Oh, thank God.
I think that almost the Venn diagram is now becoming like on top of each other, because so much research has been done on mental health issues, trauma, and all these reasons, poverty, racism, discrimination, all these things that we've learned through the years of like, good grief, we have got to be smarter here. We have got to be more creative and more nurturing and kind and gentle and all this good stuff. So this mediation is just kind of one practice among in this trend, I believe.
But then, I think of myself as a high school student. Oh my God, I was so self-righteous and hard to deal with. I know, it's hard to believe, isn't it? I got suspended many times, and I'm trying to think, would have it worked, or what do you do with somebody who's just not going to, fall in?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the way people think about this is almost like a pyramid, and for maybe 80% of the kids who get the traditional discipline, the slap on the hand, the suspension, the call home, the grounding, the privileges taken away, that'll work. They won't do it again. But we're really talking about maybe that 20% of students who maybe don't respond to that slap on the hand or that removal of privileges, that 20% who might need additional nurturance, support, teaching, and those are the kids we're trying to wrap around and do more of these supports, whether it's teaching social skills in groups or having trauma support or any number of things. And but that being said, mediation has grown every year since we started. The first year we had about 34. The next year. The first year we had about 38, then the next year we had 34, and then the third year we had 57. Last year we had 83. And I'm pleased to say that more teachers were asking for the mediations. Usually the referrals can come from parents, students, teachers, or administrators, and mainly it's been administrator-driven. But last year for the first time, and this isn't in the book, but it was for the first time teachers asked for them more than administrators, so that was pretty cool.
And you have some really nice statistics here. An average of 3 years of data indicates that 82% of students who participated in teacher-student mediation had no further disciplinary referrals from that teacher. And in 1 year, 88% of the students who participated in student mediation had no further disciplinary actions derived from conflict with one another. Those are great statistics.
Yeah, I mean, student mediation was also kind of a no-brainer because students will walk around with all kinds of stress and angst because of conflicts, and now with social media, somebody said something on Twitter or Snapchat or I don't know what.
Yeah, whatever they're doing.
And it's, and they're on their phones and they see this and they're upset, or maybe something over the weekend, and again, it's voluntary. Would you like to have a mediation with this person? The other person, would you like to have a mediation with this person? And they'll say yes a lot. And those meetings can sometimes be 5 minutes long. Just they needed to clear the air. And it's just real common sense and real simple and pretty darn effective.
Well, I wonder about that in terms of, I dislike I like that people are being more protected, but I dislike the bullying jargon and movement that sometimes is happening to put people in this person's the bad person and this person's the good person victim. So here's the perpetrator, here's the victim, and I understand that is sometimes the case, but I also understand they're all kids, right?
I'm really glad you say that because I address that very thing in the book, because I also do not like that characterization of the bully and the victim. It's not good for the bully and it's not good for the victim. And in fact that, there's a lot more nuance in these relationships. And so yes, we kind of don't use that. Well, I don't use those words. I say, again, are you willing to have this conversation? And I think that people can exert power in different ways, which isn't to say that there aren't real bullies out there, but and in those cases, maybe mediation isn't the best intervention. Something else would be. But when it works and when kids are willing to do it, it can be very effective.
And so how is this part of the restorative justice kind of movement? I know that I think Urbana has recently hired somebody to be a restorative justice facilitator or something. Is that different, or do you know?
I think Urbana, I don't know if they're using this type of mediation, but I think they're doing maybe some restorative circles and things like that. I know Oakland, California is doing things like that, and some elementary schools, sometimes it's a circle thing. Sometimes it is the restorative justice thing where there is sort of a perpetrator who has to apologize and peer juries. There's different models of it. What I like about the mediation technique I describe in Restore the Respect is that it doesn't create a perpetrator-victim dyad either. And at no point is anyone forced to apologize. Often people do apologize, and it's always spontaneous, and it's always really welcome. And that can be the teacher as well as the student or one of the students. And you see the relief that happens when they are able to, because, kids know right from wrong. They know that, telling a teacher to F off is inappropriate. And it's really good when they can just spontaneously say, oh, my bad, that was, you didn't deserve that. I was having a bad day, or, it wasn't about you, or whatever it was. And then so much of the time teachers are relieved to know it wasn't them, or sometimes it was them, or sometimes the kids, did respond to something the teacher did or didn't do. And it's really important and helpful for the teachers to hear that.
I did that to my teachers 10 years afterwards. I wrote them a letter.
Wow. Did you feel better?
I did.
See that?
Part of my program, making amends. So I had to do it. I had teachers on my list for sure. Yep. And let's see. So you have a Maya Angelou quote in your book, I think. That can you say it off the top of your head?
Well, I don't.
You know where it is?
I don't have it memorized. It's actually the beginning of the preface, and I'll read it really quick. It says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel."
And that's what you're really working toward, I guess, with this.
You know, it sounds so simple, but it really is a lot about feelings. And just that. The reason I got excited about mediation was that I was witnessing some real human moments between the teachers and students that were precious and eye-opening and kind of too good to keep under wraps. Grace is, maybe that's too strong a word, but teachers being so kind to their students and so caring, and students showing incredible dignity and respect. And it was like, wait a minute, this is the troublemaker kid and this is the unfair teacher. This isn't the roles they've been playing in that classroom of 30 people. When they get into this room, they're learning about each other. They're going beyond what Adichie calls in her TED Talk, the danger of a single story. They're going beyond that single story and becoming fully formed human beings. And because of the structure of the mediation, they're able to hear each other's perspective. And because of the questioning of the mediator and a little probing here and there, humanizing, I was tired, I was hungry, my dad was in the hospital, or, I had this problem with my friend, and then I came to class, or I just got in school, whatever it was. There's so much that goes into a behavior. And so they're able to learn more about each other and then actually care about each other. And I've seen people hug. I've seen people cry. I've seen teachers tear up like crazy. And it's just astonishing to witness. And it was kind of beautiful. And there's actually a little passage in the book if you want me to read it.
Please do.
It's because I didn't know how people would respond to this at all. I thought when we presented at the faculty meeting the very first time, I thought teachers would complain like, "What the heck is this? What? No way."
Do you think I have time for this?
Yeah. So here's a little passage from the preface. It says, I began conducting teacher-student mediations at Centennial High School in the 2011-2000 school year and observed something extraordinary. Away from the hubbub of the classroom and all the other students, away from grade books and discussions of missing assignments, the structure of mediation provided a teacher and student with the opportunity to speak with a different voice, hear with different ears, and see with a different perspective. I was touched as I saw teachers lean in and show care, compassion, and a sincere desire to help their students. I was moved to see students rise to the occasion and respectfully, honestly, and appropriately express themselves to an adult. People were real in these meetings, speaking about hopes, goals, and frustrations. Sometimes there were tears. Sometimes there were hugs. Teachers and students relaxed and beamed when positive statements were made. Quote, "I like Ms. Reynolds because she cares." Quote, "Martin makes really insightful comments." The universal human need to be understood and validated cannot be underestimated, and the structure of the mediation facilitated these game-changing moments. People could tell their full stories without interruption, they were heard non-judgmentally, and they were given a safe space to address concerns, make amends, and move forward. Mediation allowed teachers and students alike to move away from the danger of a single story, so beautifully described in the 2009 TED Talk by Adichie, to a more nuanced, multifaceted understanding of one another. Adichie said, quote, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." The mediation revealed that the student who doesn't care, quote unquote, in fact does care, and the, quote, unfair teacher, in fact, is struggling to be fair. And I like that quote, so now I'm done reading.
That's okay.
But, 80% year after year after year after year of the mediations conducted in my school have been primarily with African-American students and white teachers. And I really value this fact in terms of it being a tool that we can use to help build rapport and trust. And I think it's been effective.
That's wonderful. It really is. So so 80% of it's between black students and white teachers. Of course, it's probably because there's mostly white teachers and mostly black students.
Well, no, it's not mostly black students.
It isn't,
No.
but most of them who are going to be disciplined apparently or have conflict.
Yes, and most who are willing also to participate.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Never thought
Not
about
that too many people turn it away. Most people will participate.
Will they?
Yeah, they really do.
That's lovely. So talk to us about the process of becoming an author and thinking about how you're going to write the book.
Well, I was sitting in my house one summer, and I got peppered with requests to present at a national conference. You know how when you belong to national organizations, like so in this case it was a National Association of School Psychologists, and it said present at our convention. And so I called my best friend who's a school psychologist who lives in California, and I said, okay, I have this idea. I've been really wanting to talk about mediation. I've never presented before at a conference. If I apply and they select it, it's going to be in Washington, D.C. Will you go with me? She said yes. So I was just one of those stream of consciousness things. I just, sat at my computer and wrote out the proposal, ran around, did a little research, and it was selected. And when I was at the convention, one of the things that's there is a big exhibit hall, and there were educational publishers. And I was just kind of full of myself, I guess, and just pumped up about being there. And so I went up to all the educational publishers that were there, and I said, I know you're here to sell books, but I have an idea about something that I think should be a book. And I proceeded to ramble on for about 10 minutes about how excited I was about mediation, how simple it was, how schools can implement it free of charge. And it's just, good grief, it's just a simple idea that should really be implemented everywhere. And one of the publishers, and I wrote thank you notes to everybody. Thank you for your time. I took their cards. And one of the publishers, which was Brooks Publishing Company, had a senior acquisitions editor who happened to be there, who doesn't usually go to these conventions. And she wrote me back and said, submit your proposal and send it to my attention. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And how long ago was that, Ondine?
2 years.
Oh, good.
I've never worked so hard on anything in my life. It was like, writing 10-term papers, and you have to do research. You can't just wing it. You have to make it serious. I can't just say, you guys, try this out. It's really cool. So I had to do the work.
Well, I love the idea about how simple it is, really, that it isn't anything that we can't understand, that everybody wants to be heard, everybody wants to be understood, that oftentimes there's underlying stories. So you're talking about this idea about a single story and the TED Talk. Spell the person whose name you're talking about who gives that TED Talk.
Her last name is Adiche. Let me double check. The first name is Chimamanda. The middle name is Ngozi, which I think might be pronounced Nyozi, and Adichie, Adichie. She's an author, and she's written novels and things like that. But this TED Talk was really special, and it's called The Danger of a Single Story.
And apparently it fed you in terms of thinking. It's not about mediation necessarily, right? It's about the fact that everything has nuances.
Yes.
And that's what you're really trying to do with the mediation, is to get to the nuances of the story, I guess.
Absolutely. And also so much now is on just the relationships between teachers and students and things like that. I mean, schools have always been about academics, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, our curriculum, technology, all these things. And so it's, you just want to keep raising the flag. It's also about relationships. It's about relationships. It's about building trust and rapport. And I think that this kind of movement has also been coinciding with a movement toward teachers being more reflective also about themselves. They can be triggered by their students. They bring their own emotional, stuff to the class. So a lot of this is teachers being willing to be reflective. They're willing to be reflective about what their triggers might be, what aspects exist in their background, what their unconscious bias is. And when you have a real living, breathing student sitting there and saying, I felt bad because, this was said, and this really made me feel bad about myself. That's going to be a moment that teacher will remember, and it's not coming from a principal in a evaluation. This is coming from your living, breathing student. So I think that these teachers who are willing to participate in mediation are very strong, reflective individuals, because I think it takes some courage to be in this meeting, because for that meeting, it's kind of a level playing field. It's a safe meeting, but it's a level playing field.
Yeah, it takes them out of their role of authority for sure. All right, so what else do we want to talk about? Anything else before the top of the hour? You want to talk about WEFT with me?
Sure.
Ondine's made independent media before. We met at the IMC, at the Independent Media Center, when we were both making IMC Radio News.
That's right. I had read in a little blurby ad somewhere, learn how to produce radio. And I was working part-time at the time, and I had I'd always sort of admired journalism and things like that. So I responded to the ad. It's like, okay, I want to learn radio producing. And a wonderful man named Clint Puppets taught me, and not that I ever mastered the very complex computer.
We had big dreams about being like This American Life back then.
Yeah. But I was able to do this really cool series, and I made about 8 shows, and about 6 of them were a series called Good to Know, in which I interviewed activists from Champaign-Urbana and just kind of asked them about why they do what they do. And I'm really excited to say that they were great interviews, and some of them, like one with John Lee Johnson is archived all of them are archived at the Urbana Free Library in their historic department. I made sure that. Ha-Ho from the Refugee Center, Tim Shea about LGBTQ stuff. There was a woman named Amy Rickman who did Girl Zone.
Yeah.
I interviewed the IMC individuals for starting that. Sasha, and I'm blanking on the other.
Not Danielle.
No,
Sasha.
I should have interviewed Danielle.
But I'll have to give them a re-listen, and we'll have to see if we can do like a 10 years later thing.
Yeah.
Sasha's gone on to do big stuff in media. He is a freedom internet policy lobbyist. So he works in Washington, D.C. He lobbies for internet freedom and all about that. So he was one of the founding funders of the IMC for sure, and one of the movers and shakers that got it started. Amy Rickman went on to get her PhD, and she's teaching out in Berkeley, and she's teaching in educational policy studies. She started Girl Zone here, which was a wonderful organization that did girls workshops for a long time. I don't know, Tim Shea, that rings a bell.
He's actually a therapist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's a therapist in private practice. And Ha-Ho from the Refugee Center, who's worked a lot with our Vietnamese refugees, and that's a great organization too, East Central Illinois. But the main thing was, and I really appreciated WEFT when this book came out, because you reached out to me and I reached out to you, and I thought, how nice that a local person can write a book and be on the radio and talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's so comfortable, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
You're welcome. It is a wonderful opportunity. We bring so many voices to the radio. So all of those people that we just talked about, they've all been on the radio here. So you just can't believe the number of people who come through here. And we're trying to do a better job of keeping that all organized now. As you know, you signed in when you came here so that we can keep track of who all comes through this studio. Because through the years, anybody who's been a mover and a shaker in Champaign-Urbana has sat in these chairs. And we have kept this little gem of a radio station going for 35 years. It's pretty amazing, and it's rare.
It is a gem. It is a gem of a radio station. I have
really
to say
is.
that. And I was really pleased to visit here and be here today, because they've refurbished everything. It's just beautiful and clean and organized, and it's really a special location.
It is. When you think about public radio, people often think about NPR stations and WILL, but those are all professionals. They all are people who get paid to be the hosts there, and they have their ways that they do things, and we love them too. But it's not the same as like, oh, there's this person who just happens to be interested in this, who has a show, and she can get in here. And so it really is amazing that you can have a show here, that you can then have your friends on your show, that you can have people who you meet in the community on your shows. So I love the public affairs here, and I love WEFT for being here for me all these years, and for I like to say, what people ask me why I'm doing what I do with WEFT, which I spent a lot of time trying to help WEFT right now. And the reason is because it changed my life. Literally listening to Democracy Now! And becoming aware from the Saturday morning program, John Lee Johnson's program, and which went on to be other higher ground programs and whatnot. Literally, I got my roots in activism, and I've made a difference in the community because of the things I've learned here. So the ripple effect of WEFT is great. And so if you believe in that, and if you believe in community radio and independent media and don't believe that you should get all of your news from WCIA or the such and such, whatever, then you need to support community radio and call us now at 359-9338. I've had Ondine Gross in the studio with me as my guest. Thank you to Brian Dunn, who did the news with me, to Saxon Burns, who is running the board for us. This is CU Progressive News. We bring you this news show every Monday night at 6 o'clock live on WEFT. It's available right away on Radio Free America by going to WEFT.org. You can hear it archived for 2 weeks from our website, WEFT.org, or you can subscribe to our WEFT podcast, and then you will always be able to get it anytime you want to listen later. So that's available. It's also going to play on UPTV on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. and then right away they put it on their YouTube channel. So lots of venues to be able to catch this later, and we will put a link to it on our Facebook page so that you can hear Ondine's and she can pass it on to all of her friends.